Hello, English scholars. This is Miss Haxton, and this video is your lesson for Thursday, January 7th. To start today, please open up your daily work poetry unit Google Doc and scroll to page 7 under the heading Thursday, January 7th. Our objective in this lesson is to describe how an author uses a literary device in a poem. So if you feel that you can do that by the end of this lesson, put an X under yes, I can. If you feel that you are not quite there yet, you will be soon, but you're not quite ready to do it yourself, then you'll put an X in this category, not yet. So first you need to complete the warm-up. The warm-up is to complete these similes with creative ideas from your imagination. So the first one is the sunlight was as bright as. What is something really, really bright that you can think of? Okay, fill in your idea here. Her scream was as loud as. What's something really, really loud that you could compare to a scream? Write an idea here. And his whisper was quiet like. Okay, what is something really quiet? Okay, write your idea here. Okay, so the homework for today is to watch this video about how an author can use a literary device in a poem and how you can analyze that use of the literary device. So here we are. Literary analysis. Okay, you will see the word literary analysis many, many times as you take English classes in the high schools here in Iowa City. Being asked to write a literary analysis is something that every student is asked to do, usually many times. What's interesting is that I think a lot of students don't really know what a literary analysis is, what those words mean. Okay, it can be very confusing. Okay, literary analysis, those are big words and difficult words. So let's break down what they mean. Literature, the word literature means written work, anything that is written down on paper is literature. So then the word literary means anything that has to do with written work. Literary means anything about literature, anything about written words. And then we have analysis. The word analysis comes from the verb analyze. And to analyze means to figure out the meaning of something. What does it mean? And especially to figure out the meaning by breaking something down into smaller parts. To take a big thing, like a whole book or a whole story, and to look at it part by part, line by line, maybe even word by word, to look at exactly what the author is doing, what words the author is choosing, what ideas the author is putting together to form meaning. Okay, analyze means to make meaning by looking at the small parts of something. So, an analysis is an explanation of meaning. It is where you explain how all the parts add up and connect to make meaning. So then, what is a literary analysis? Okay, put together these things. A literary analysis is where you explain. Usually you're writing, like writing a paragraph or writing a paper. Okay, you are explaining in writing how the different parts of a story or a text all add up and connect together to make the meaning of the story or text. Okay, how all the different parts of the text add up to give the reader a message or some meaning. Okay, now we are in a poetry unit. Okay, And that's really good news for you. The word analyze means to break down into parts. A text is a piece of writing. So, what are the different parts of a piece of writing? Well, a piece of writing is made up of words. So, the different parts of a text are words. Okay, so we're going to have to look at the words and how the author uses them if we're going to do some analyzing, some analysis. Now, you're lucky that we're in a poetry unit because poetry usually doesn't have that many words. Okay, compared to a story or compared to a book, poems are small. They don't have that many words. Okay, that makes them easier to analyze. Okay, you don't have to look so hard. So, we already know a lot of things that authors do with words to make meaning. Okay, we know about repetition. When an author repeats words to emphasize them, to show how important they are. And that leads us towards meaning, okay, towards knowing what an author thinks is important. We know that imagery is where an author uses words to describe something that a character can see or hear, taste, touch, or feel. We know that authors can use symbolism, where they use words to write about an object that actually represents a bigger idea. We know that authors use irony. They write in words about something unexpected to surprise us. We know that authors use foreshadowing. Okay, they write hints into their writing to predict what will happen later. And we know that authors use rhyme. Okay, authors use words that sound similarly to make a text flow and sound musical and beautiful. So we already know a lot of literary devices. Okay, so these words are called literary devices. They are techniques or things that an author does with words to make meaning in a story. So when you read a text, okay, like a poem, and your teacher wants you to do a literary analysis, you're going to have to read the poem and you're going to have to really look carefully at the words and try to figure out what the author is doing with words to make meaning. Here are some questions you can ask yourself. Does the author do anything interesting with words? Are there any words that jump out at you? Are there any parts of the poem that sound especially beautiful because of the words? Okay, look at that stuff. What is the author doing with words that's interesting? Number 2, can I identify the name of the literary device that describes what the author is doing with the words? So if you found something interesting, can you connect that with a literary device? Okay, oh, this part is so beautiful because the author is using rhyme. Or this part is so powerful because the author is repeating a word many times with repetition. Okay? Can you connect the interesting parts of the poem with a literary device? How does the use of that literary device affect how the poem sounds? Okay, how does that literary device make the poem sound a certain way? And how does the use of the literary device affect the feeling that the poem gives you or the meaning of the poem? So I'm going to show you this process with this poem called Messy Room. Okay, you've read this poem before. Let's read it again together. Messy room. Whosever room this is should be ashamed. His underwear is hanging on the lamp. His raincoat is there in the overstuffed chair, and his chair is becoming quite mucky and damp. His workbook is wedged in the window. His sweater's been thrown on the floor. His scarf and one ski are beneath the TV, and his pants have been carelessly hung on the door. His books are all jammed in the closet. His vest has been left in the hall. A lizard named Ed is asleep in his bed, and his smelly old sock has been stuck to a wall. Whosever room this is should be ashamed. Donald or Robert or Willie or... Huh? You say it's mine? Oh dear, I knew it looked familiar. Okay, so this is the poem with the funny ending, right? Okay, the speaker of the poem is talking like the room must belong to somebody else. And then at the end, he learns that it's his room. Okay, so let's go through these questions to analyze this poem. Okay, this poem is funny, and this poem um, is fun to read. It flows. It has kind of a sing-songy flow. I felt like I was singing a song. Okay, and I want to know what the author did with words to make it feel like that. So, does the author do anything interesting with words? Okay, well, does this poem rhyme or is it free verse? I see some words that rhyme: lamp, damp, but ashamed and chair don't rhyme. So there's some rhyme, but overall, this is a free verse poem. Door, floor, hall, wall. But the other words in between, closet, bed, no, they don't rhyme. Okay, so some words rhyme, but not all of them. Okay, and there is a lot of repetition. If you look now at the beginning of each line, you see one word show up a lot more than others, and that word is his. His underwear, his raincoat, his workbook, his sweater, his scarf, his books, his vest, his smelly old sock. Okay? So the words his paired with a possession like a book or a scarf occurs many times in this poem. Okay, that's part of the reason it sounded kind of like a song, because I was repeating the same thing over and over. Now, do we have a name for this when the author uses the same words over and over? We do. It's repetition, right? Okay, this author is using repetition. Okay, so the words his plus an object like a book or sock are repeated many times. Okay, and that's repetition. Okay, and the repetition and the little bit of rhyme kind of made the poem um, feel musical, like a song. So the partial rhyming and repetition made the poem sound musical. Now, that's how it makes the poem sound when we read it and when we hear it. But how does this repetition affect the meaning of the poem? So at the end of the poem, there's a surprise. The room doesn't belong to someone else. The room is the speaker's room. It's his room. Okay, so when he's talking about his workbook, he should be saying my workbook. His sweater, he should be saying my sweater. Okay, so why do you think the author repeats his workbook, his sweater, his scarf? Okay, these things emphasize that he thinks the objects belong to somebody else. Okay, and then at the end, there's a surprise, and we learn that it belongs to him. Okay, so repetition of him shows how, not him, his, shows how the speaker believes the objects belong to someone else. Okay. And then at the end, there's a surprise, and we learn that all this stuff belongs to the speaker. Oh, wait a second. Isn't there a literary device where the author makes us think that the poem is going one way and then, poof, surprise at the end? Bro, yeah, that's irony, right? Okay, situational irony. You think that the story is going one way, but then at the end, there's a big surprise. That's situational irony. Okay, so another literary device is irony. Okay, so the repetition of his, okay, every time that the author uses the word his, makes us, the reader, think that these objects must belong to someone else. It's his workbook, somebody else's workbook, somebody else's raincoat, somebody else's underwear, okay, somebody else's vest, okay? So all of these lines make us very sure that this room must belong to somebody else. And that makes this surprise at the end even more surprising, even more shocking. What? It's the speaker's room? What? Okay, so the repetition helps with that. Okay. So now we need to put all of these things together in a paragraph form. Okay. So the author of this poem is Shel Silverstein. Shel Silverstein uses repetition and irony. Those are the literary devices. In his poem, Messy Room. Okay, now we need to explain how the author uses repetition. Okay, so we need to break it down into parts. Remember, analysis means you have to explain each part. So I have to explain the part that uses repetition and the part that uses irony, okay, in this poem, this work of literature. He repeats the words his plus an object like a sock or book, which makes us think the room belongs to someone else other than the speaker. Then, at the end of the poem, the author uses irony when the speaker finds out that it is his own room, not someone else's. We also talked about how the repetition and the rhyming, partial rhyming, makes the poem sound more musical. The poet meaning Shel Silverstein, uses repetition and some rhyme to make the poem sound musical and fun to read. Now we're ready for a conclusion. Okay, there was repetition, there was irony, we explained what was repeated, what the irony was, we talked about the rhyme. We are ready for a conclusion. Okay. The repetition, rhyme, and irony of this poem make it fun, make it an exciting work to read. Okay, it's exciting, it's surprising, and it's fun. Okay, so this is a literary analysis paragraph. Okay, you have to explain the devices, the literary devices that an author uses, like repetition and irony, and there was a little bit of rhyming, right? And then you need to give examples of how the author does this. Okay, he repeats the words his plus an object. Okay, and then we need to know the effect. Okay, it makes us, the repetition of those words has this effect. Okay, irony, when the speaker finds out that it's his own room. Okay, makes the repetition and the rhyming makes the poem sound musical and fun to read. Okay, so explain the literary devices, where they are used, and what the effect is. Okay, that's a literary analysis paragraph. These are hard work. They are hard to write. Okay, you have to read a poem, and you have to understand the basic meaning of the poem. And then you have to look really carefully at the words and look for things like symbolism and irony. And these are hard things just by themselves. Okay, and then you have to find them in a poem. And then you have to write a whole paragraph about how the author uses them. This is tough stuff. Okay, and we're going to do it over and over together. And we're going to look at examples and you're going to get a lot of practice. Okay, this is not something that will be easy and it's not something that will come fast. Okay, but we will work on it together, and over time, you will learn to write paragraphs of literary analysis just like this. Okay, so go ahead and go back to your Google Doc here, down here on page 7. You've watched the video. Okay, now part 2 says define and write an example of irony in your chart. Okay, so with this poem, Messy Room, we reviewed irony. What is irony? Okay, irony is the surprise ending. Okay, irony is when an author writes about something unexpected to surprise us. So go ahead and pause your video and write this definition here on page 5. I guess that's actually page 6, huh? Okay, page 6. Wait, no, it's not. It's page 5. It's the bottom of page 5 in your Google Doc. Okay, irony. What is the definition? And the only example you have from today is about messy room. So your example will be how the boy in messy room found out that it's his room at the end of the poem. The messy room is his room. Okay, that's the irony in this poem. Okay, after you have done that, you are done with the lesson today, and I will see you tomorrow on Friday. Have a great day.